Okay, we are live, as you can see here. Thank you so much to my two guests. So today we have on Amy Drake and Julie Guirguis from the Owen Golden Gate Point in Sarasota, Florida. We're going to get into backgrounds and more about the building in a second, but we're just going to hop right into the first question. So for both of you, what I'd like to start with is geography. I think especially with this building's location, could you tell me in your own words what you think is really individually significant about what Golden Gate Point is to Southwest Florida, if you had to peel it back from amongst the high density of condominiums that you have access to, resale and new, and also what this building's location as far as the individual site is significant versus maybe some of the other options you would have within the Golden Gate Point area.
Yes, I think Golden Gate is, in terms of neighborhood, it's really quaint. You have all the excitement, the accessibility and availability of downtown, but you're a little bit removed. You're surrounded by Sarasota Bay. So for Sarasota, it is known as a downtown neighborhood, but it's known as kind of like a quiet, quaint pocket neighborhood. In terms of the site, Julie, you might want to talk about the site a little bit.
Yeah, and I think kind of piggybacking on what you said, we really feel like Golden Gate is the closest you can get to a residential neighborhood, but still being downtown. So, you'll see everyone walking their dogs, everyone gets to know each other, but you're just slightly removed from a little bit of the downtown, noise and a little bit more chaos. So, and a great location. And then the site, we cover the entire southern tip of the interior portion on Golden Gate Point. So it is a really massive site, and we cover, I think it's 3 parcels. Is that right, Amy?
Yes, 3 parcels.
We're not on the water itself, but we have magnificent water views from our higher floors. And there's a buffer between our building and the other buildings surrounding it, which is really nice. So it gives you kind of even a more of an open, airy feel.
The building itself is going to have a 30-foot setback from the street. So that allows us to have like a beautiful walking path and beautiful landscaping. As Julie said, it's, we've got the whole southern point of Golden Gate Point. So it gives you, and it's going to be gated, this community. So it gives you a sense of privacy, and it's kind of an important site. It's like a flagship site on Golden Gate Point. Just another note about the location, Golden Gate Point. It's walkable, it's bikeable. We now have the new Bay Runner, a little open air trolley that runs all the way from St. Armand's and the beaches all the way to downtown. So it's super accessible. You don't have to get in your car, really. Everything is kind of right outside your door.
If you were just looking in Florida as a whole, and you see these maybe some similar other peninsula kind of items in Southwest Florida, how unique and scarce Golden Gate Point is going to be at maturity when you're already kind of weaning on water adjacent new pre-construction condominium buildings, but then you layer I've heard people say it a lot of ways, but they reference downtown a lot. When you think of downtown, Sarasota is definitely an anomaly, but Golden Gate Point has to be one of the single most unique locations I've ever seen in any state, really. I mean, with the proximity to Lido Beach above it, it is like this weirdly unique place in a world where Sarasota is already highly restricted, I know Sarasota has the 18-story limit, but Golden Gate Point has limits on top of that. And then the residential element, where I've spoke to a lot of people about, thinking of pre-construction in this manner as an exit from a single family home and finding solace in a residential peninsula versus, you may be thinking of pre-construction, a lot of people rather, as these are urban folks that are used to busy cities. And, that's why they're okay with living in a turnkey condominium, where Golden Gate feels like it's west of the trail single families, but in a turnkey nature.
So yes, there are no 18-story towers on Golden Gate Point. And as you mentioned, it does have a very residential feel. It's, got the paver streets and the lampposts. And as Julie mentioned, people walking their dog. It's a true neighborhood. People have some sensitivity to water view, no water view. I think that is part of the beauty of our site at the Owen. We are the southern tip of Golden Gate Point, and it is an interior site, but we're as close to the water as you can get. And there are lots of view corridors between the existing buildings. Most of those buildings are newer on the newer side. They're probably going to be there in the long term. So we feel that, the views are mostly protected. And so for the long term, especially as you get up on the high floors, although our views really do begin from level 5. So this is a 10-story building, 29 residences, and you are getting beautiful views. Julie and I were sitting down on one of the little park benches right on the ground level the other day, and we were thinking, even here you get some peekaboo views, even on the ground level. And of course you always get the bay breezes, and just very, very beautiful.
Yeah, and the developers spent months and months and months positioning and repositioning the building to make sure that each floor plan has, that the best corridor view that they can get. So
I think that just the idea of pre-construction, I'm going to wait 2 years, and I heard a lot about, some of that excitement and that fervor people are worried about. Is it going to be what it is rendering wise when it's all said and done for me? And layering on this kind of protection. And one, Golden Gate Point, as big as it looks on a map, it feels so much incredibly smaller to me. I mean, it feels like a cul-de-sac. But you see all these little small older units, and a lot of people have said to me, well, once those guys sell off, and they throw the 10-story in front of it and stuff, I do think you have this one. I think they will keep intact the integrity of it. I mean, nothing's a guarantee, but for one place, even beyond the quay and the bay and all these other areas, there's not many places you could say that are going to look similar in 10 years as they do now, and as this place might.
I mean, we think Golden Gate in general is going to look better in 10 years from now, because everything will be complete. I think the founders of Sarasota, John Ringling, and his development partner was Owen Burns, and that's how we got the name of the building, as a nod to Owen Burns. This was their first area of residential development. So even way back in the 20s, they recognized what made Golden Gate, kind of what set it apart. It wasn't right on Main Street, but it was just on the edge of the beaches. And they were just developing St. Armand Circle at that time. As a matter of fact, John Ringling's sales office was right there on St. Armand Circle. That's the Cafe Europe, used to be the sales office of John Ringling. Just a little bit of history.
That's super interesting. I think with all the fragility going on, in my opinion, and these price points, and I still think a lot of this Southwest Florida area it's maybe weird to say, but I still think it's undervalued, because we're going back to old school real estate dynamics. It's just where these places are physically based on a map. They're not going to get any worse. And if you had to pick one, you want the most central around the best stuff, and to the state, the country, all of it as a whole. And I think Southwest Florida, west of the trail, below Lido and above Siesta Key, probably wins out that argument if you had to make the argument, because everything else that's attractive is on somewhat of a fringe to the state, which makes it maybe vulnerable when it comes to long-term value. Okay. So I think that was super informative. So where I would like to go from here is the entry to really all the dynamics of the building. Could you guys give me basically a elevator pitch version of, if we're in an elevator, 3 minutes, we're taking the ride up, and we had no context to the building. Could you give me the quick version of what exactly is this project?
So I think, as Amy mentioned, it's 29 residences. So we're a little bit more of a boutique building, maybe for someone that's not interested in, 150 unit complex. Every residence has its own private elevator entry, which is really important to a lot of people. Even though we're a smaller kind of boutique building, our amenities are really more comparable to a larger, resort type building. So we have an infinity pool, a very large gym, steam and sauna, as Amy mentioned, a walking path all the way around the tip of the building, a dog park. So we really have a lot to offer, even though we have, maybe a smaller footprint than some of the larger buildings. Nice entryway with a 2-story foyer lobby. So our parking will be on the first and second levels, then the amenity deck, and 1 residence on the 3rd floor, and then 4 residences per floor up through the 10th floor.
Something that's kind of unique about the Owen is that the developer, for all pre-construction buyers, will allow each of the owners to work with our architects, MHK architects. They can customize these floor plans. That is highly unusual in this market. Well, really anywhere. But this developer, the Ronto Group, they've built hundreds and hundreds of condominiums. They're based in Naples. They're also building the Rosewood in Sarasota out on Lido. And that is their approach. They want these owners to make these residences their own. So our customers really appreciate that.
Yeah, that's extremely unique. I was just going to mention, Ronto doing the boutique building was unique in its own outright. To have that kind of backing on a 20 something unit building, is pretty unique for that area, I think. But how unique are you seeing people do on that, the adjusting of the architecture and the floor plans and the layouts? Are you seeing, is interior design partners becoming a big part of the pre-construction process with people? Where are you seeing with your current kind of sales people go to the depths of utilizing that unique facet?
Yeah, I think because we're in the reservation stage right now, and we'll be going to contract within the next few months, I think we'll start to see more of that. People kind of have a general overview of what they want to do, but I think we'll get finer into the details as we get a little bit further along and they're under contract. But we should mention all of our floor plans are a minimum of 3 bedrooms, 3.5 baths. And then we have 2 of our 4 floor plans also have a den. So some people are, maybe want to make a den a bedroom or kind of move things around. So there's a lot of options in the 4 plans that we have. So Amy, I don't know if you've seen that anyone's massively overhauled a change. It's just kind of more tweaks here and there.
Yeah, because I think the plans are very approachable and very livable. The architects and the developers spent a long time on these floor plans. I think they're really in tune with what today's buyers are looking for. But as Julie mentioned, some people are saying, well, I don't really need a separate den. Maybe I'm going to take that wall out, or I'm going to, do some tweaks in this guest suite. I'm going to make this more my office. So in terms of designers, I'd say probably these are going to be delivered fully finished. And there's lots of selection, with floors and countertops and cabinets. So the general contractor, Connor Gaskin, will have a person that is doing all the finishing. So once our buyers go to contract, they'll begin to work with Gretchen, our selections and our finishing person. And that's where they'll do all their tweaks. So maybe 50% of the buyers would bring their own designers in. The nice thing is if people who buy pre-construction have the most flexibility to make changes and upgrades and anything that they kind of want to do. If you wait too long, then the footprint is kind of sealed. So
I think that's a really nice option. So if someone's sitting back home and they're looking at all the pre-construction, they're narrowed to Sarasota, and they're saying, if they were to, you guys were to say this piece, and they're like, oh, that's me, that's perfect for me beyond the location. What do you think the main, if we were demographics aside, we're kind of painting an avatar for what the perfect buyer for the Owen would value? What do you think some of those values are?
You mean aside from the location and all the other things that it has?
Yeah, just if you said, in a world where Golden Gate does add a layer of unique factor to the location, but in, with the condominiums, unlike the single families, you just have a high density of the location being awesome for most condominiums. So it's not like the suburb divides them anymore. So you come to Golden Gate and you can pick between 3 to 4 buildings. So if it being new isn't setting it apart completely, what would you say the differentiators from I value this versus being a block over and being able to build a new pre-construction condominium 3-bedroom place elsewhere, just as someone trying to separate it in their minds, without mentioning other building names as well?
I think a lot of it is people are looking for view, which I think so that's great. I think these are all about your lifestyle choices and how people see themselves living here. I think the people that have been working with appreciate the level of amenities, the fact that, as Julie mentioned, for a small building of 29 residences, we have lots of amenities, a game room and a gathering room and Zoom rooms. And so I think people are, they'll say, I want to have a building that has a pool table in it. Because either for me or my friends or my grandkids, it sounds silly, but it's just the little things that it's like you said, it's layers and you begin to layer on. So of course, the location, the views, I think also the security of working with a developer like Ronto, pre-construction purchasing, you have to be a visionary. We've seen people who, I've sold many, many pre-construction condominiums. And the people who come in early generally do the best. You take a little tiny risk because you can't touch it and feel it. You're buying it from paper. So you do have to have that vision. So when you're doing that, especially today, it's so important to work with a developer who is seasoned, who does what they say they're going to do, who has the financial backing. So I think that's another factor that sometimes gets overlooked. But savvy buyers who are the buyers for these price points, that's very important to them.
Yeah. I'd like to get in your background a little bit if it's okay with you guys, because I think one of the biggest differences in dealing with people that represent condominium buildings that are new beyond like single family homes is the staff individually of like how meticulous you guys are selected to represent the building. The pride that you guys take in representing these buildings is unlike any of the other we do a lot of new construction, and it's unlike anything like that in the world. It's very much like matchmaking of the right people for the right building, and the way you guys describe it I've always thought was really unique, and it's unique from building to building. So I think like everything you just said has so much more weight when people kind of understand the history of why you created that point of view in generally. So would you guys mind stepping through kind of your background to pre-construction, the building individually, but also even like your evolution to your existence in Sarasota in general and that kind of thing, just to give the audience a little bit more context?
Sure. So I've been in Sarasota almost 20 years now. When I originally started here, I was in commercial banking and finance and made my way towards real estate to kind of combine all those different expertise from finance and banking. And I think the one I think Amy would agree, as she mentioned the developer, our integrity and our trust and our honesty is so important in selling this building, to the purchasers. And Ronto is the perfect fit for that because, as she said, they say what they're going to do and they do it. They don't, pull back. They don't waffle. They don't change things midstream because they want to put their best foot forward from the beginning. So that's something that we as a team, Amy and I and our other partner, Lisa, really align with. So that's, a big selling point for us in being on board with them.
And the Ronto Group actually approached us. So we're part of the LRM team. It's Lisa Rooks Morris of Premier Sotheby's International Realty. So particularly Lisa and I have probably sold more new construction condominiums than any other two women in the region. We've just sold a lot of new condominiums. I've been in Florida for 47 years, 37 here in Sarasota. I actually have a resort background. I have a hospitality background. And when about 20 years ago, I transitioned into real estate, the two are quite aligned because, it's all about lifestyle. It's all about kind of concierge type service. Particularly in new construction, you do have to be an expert in the building. You have to know about, how does the parking work and what's exactly the ceiling height in the kitchen versus the living room. And there's so many details on new construction. So the Ronto team came to us because of our expertise. And then, of course, the Sotheby's brand. And so that's how we got here. I have long background in new homes and managing for a large brokerage. In the last kind of uptick, like 2003, 4, 5, 6, was involved in a lot of the new buildings coming up. So I can appreciate a great developer who, as Julie says, does what they say they're going to do. A lot of salespeople can say a lot of things and make a lot of promises. So you do have to be very cautious. You have to be able to sort through all of that. It can be a little frustrating. We're like, well, can't we get that answer? And Ronto will say, well, we don't have it yet. So we're not going to say it until we know it's a fact.
Yeah, that's, I would think, a lot better, especially with a big uh-oh that would come at the end of that. So, Amy, if I could put you on the spot one more time with I know Sarasota is a melting pot, but with your, kind of legacy in Sarasota so far, where, based on what you've seen, the evolution, because I know like, it feels like the last, I thought Sarasota was incredibly underpriced. I grew up on Siesta Key. Like the pricing the stuff was 10 years ago was so wild compared to like Miami and stuff. And then it like kind of caught up. But with the evolution of like it feels like the premium level is just happening. Like the Rosewood you mentioned, and these price points of condominiums that existed like maybe 10 years ago in other Florida cities, like it just kind of caught up here. Where condominiums are going to go? Are you seeing like, pre-construction is going to exhaust the bay adjacent and the beaches because, there's only so much land, and a lot of this stuff eventually is going to kick back and just be a bunch of east of the trail urban downtown stuff like the theater district and all that because that's where the land's at? Or where do you see kind of the evolution of Ronto and these large developers that typically were existing in the Northeast and South Florida that are now all of a sudden interested in Sarasota. Are you seeing that as a trend that's going to continue, or what's your kind of guess on the evolution of condominiums in the next, I guess, decade or so?
Well, I believe that everything we read and all of the research says that our population is going to continue to grow. And we're still, I know this is hard to fathom, but you look around and you see all the new construction, we are still undersupplied in Sarasota. The demand is still far outstripping the supply. And just when people say, oh, you can't get another building in here, somebody finds a beautiful spot to put a new building. So, you mentioned, of course, there will be east of the trail and the Rosemary District and Theater District and the University District and, all of these pocket neighborhoods that are here. So I think part of what's driving all of this is the growth of the population, and we are getting a wealthier population here. And people are coming from places that we really hadn't seen before. You're getting a lot of population from California, from Texas. We always had the traditional feeder markets, the Northeast and the Midwest and, Pennsylvania, Ohio, all of those. And those have continued and they're very strong. But just our population is growing all over Florida. You touched on something, though. It is all about location, 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 whether it's a single family home or a condominium. That is going to drive pricing. And yes, as you mentioned, we're just catching up to markets like Palm Beach and Naples. And I think, and Miami to some degree. I think that, with this new population, we're growing with the trend, with the times. The other thing is the developers always like to remind us that they are now paying significant premiums for land, the cost of construction, the cost of concrete. Whether you're building a single family home or you're buying into a condominium, everything is just pricier now. So, I'd rather have the developer figuring all this out in some cases than trying to do this on my own.
Yeah, no, I think well said. Okay. So I'd like to ask one finishing question for all of these. And then I want to talk some takeaways as far as timelines and all that kind of stuff, if anything you guys want to get across there. One question I ask on the last question of every podcast is if you could picture that a bunch of condominiums, there was 1 million of these videos, and they could just make their guess at where they wanted to narrow, what they're interested in by just your answer to this question, each of your answers to this question.
The pressure's on.
There was no website. The podcast never existed. I know there's a lot of putting you on the spot, but that's why it's so authentic. But you had nothing, no website, never heard of the building, not familiar with the area, and you could say 3 statements or words or wherever you want to take it, 3 things about the project that someone could say, oh yeah, that sounds like something I want to know more about. What would those 3 things be?
I would say the word
no
custom is important to a lot of people.
Okay.
Like Amy said, depending on how early in you get, there's a lot of opportunity to customize things, which most developers won't touch. Let's see, I had another word, and
we get 6 because there's 2 of us.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I would say reputation is a big thing. There's a lot of buildings and projects going up that maybe they've never worked in Sarasota, and that can go one way or the other without naming names of buildings. But I think that is super important, especially with pre-construction. All right, Amy, you go while I think of my third one.
Forever location. That's really 2, but we'll keep that one.
You said phrase, so you're good.
Yeah, phrase. Okay, good.
A statement. People have gone paragraph before.
Security and privacy, ease and joy.
I like that.
And I don't have necessarily a word or a phrase or a way to say this, so I'm going to make it longer. But, we said for this kind of smaller boutique building, the amenities that we have, it's kind of like we have a little bit of everything with the game room and the social area and the work from home suites, but it's not over the top where you're paying for things that you might not ever use. It's kind of that sweet spot of offering above the status quo, but not everything under the sun where you're like, gosh, I'm going to be paying all these extra condo fees for something I'm not going to use.
I think that's a good one. I mean, people are very, that gets out of whack. And people are very sensitive to that, about it being like they're taking an overburden because there's not a lot of units, but there's not a lot of texture of what am I actually going to pay for. And I feel like these buyers, they know. They're coming from backgrounds of like the lake clubs of the world or nicer neighborhoods where they understand what the fees get them. And to just overpay because it's the newest building in town, I think doesn't hold weight at this price point. Okay. I like those. Those are good. If you just heard that, I mean, I think there's a lot of differentiators there. Okay. So I think that that's all I kind of wanted to cover. So if we said, and wherever you guys want to, these are evergreen videos, so timing matters. But if people want to know, okay, so I love the sound of all of this. What do I do next? What's at my disposal? Like top off, timing, reservations versus contracts. Anything you guys would like to tell the audience as far as what they could do and what they need to know?
So I think I mentioned right now we're at reservation stage. So we have 6 reserved out of the 29 residences. To reserve is $100,000 fully refundable deposit. So you get your pick of residence. You get to start thinking about your customization, and you lock that in now. But you don't have to worry about if you change your mind in a month. You can do that. So then once we convert to contract, just to keep it simple. At contract, it's a 10% deposit. At groundbreaking, it's an additional 10%, which we expect to happen first of the year, 2024. And then another 10% when the rooftop goes on. And then the balance is due, the remaining 70% is due at closing, which is anticipated end of 2025.
And so your viewers can visit our website at owengoldengate.com. And our contact information is there. Just to piggyback on what Julie said, really reservation they are non-binding, but it gives the buyer an opportunity to have the best selection, the best pricing. This is the most opportune time. This is the best opportunity for people right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good point. It sounds like you would have plenty of time to not do the reservation and think about it. But if you have the liquidity to float fully, it's not your 15-day rescission period. This is totally non-binding. Then I've seen a lot of people be like, oh yeah, I'll finally do it, and then they lost that one unit in a building of 20-something units. You could maybe only really be like one that fits your criteria well. So I think if you have the liquidity and you're not worried about that piece, then it's not a bad idea to do in 2023. Cool. Well, thank you, ladies, so much. I appreciate it. The clip after this, for the audience, I will tell you guys how to get in touch with the team, to take this kind of platform to virtual showings to see all the renderings and let them do their actual formal presentation. And they do have a sales office in downtown Sarasota if you are local. So reach out if we can get you in touch in any way possible. But thank you guys so much for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one.